Welcome to Millennial Musings. I'm Gladys.
And I'm Isabella, and we are just two opinionated millennials who sometimes make dumb mistakes. And what we want to do here is to share our experiences and offer the advice we wish we had received.
Disclaimer, we are not therapists or life coaches, and we have no actual criteria to be giving advice whatsoever. But we could be your new bestie or your big sister. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for some Millennial Musings. Hi, Isabella. How have you been this week?
Hello, I have been good. We're all getting into a routine now with the puppy. We can read her cues when she needs a little poo-poo. But we've been good. I'm really tired today, though. I feel like it's really catching up now on me. The tiredness, but otherwise, yeah, I'm good. I don't really remember what happened this week. We had a little Christmas celebration yesterday with my boyfriend's family at ours, so we hosted, and I really enjoyed it. I like hosting. We had a baby, we had a puppy, we had a full house. It was great.
Sounds like a nightmare.
I mean, yeah, it was loud, but it was great. It wasn't our baby, by the way, just a baby that visited. Yeah. So how are you? How was your week?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm okay. I did right before we started recording spill my coffee on my desk, so it's I can still hear it dripping onto the towel I put on the floor.
Oh
So
no.
I'll have to deal with that later. But no, I'm good. I'm good. Oh, I wanted to tell you that I last night, I started watching Escaping Twin Flames, which you recommended to me. And can I just say, what the fuck?
It is wild.
So, I mean, this is crazy. And I mean, maybe people have heard of it. Maybe explain what it's about to the kind listeners.
Oh, well. So it's, I think, 3-episode documentary on Netflix, and it's about this online cult. Basically, it's this couple who it's pyramid scheme meets cult. And it's this couple that just tells people that they have a twin flame, and it's usually an ex or just someone they've always had a crush on. And the concept with the twin flames is you are madly in love, but you just don't work. Like, there's a lot of struggle, and it's basically a toxic relationship. And yeah, they just force people into relationships or to stalk people and say it's completely normal. And it's like, it's a mindfuck, is what it is.
I mean, the thing is, well, first of all, I do want to say also in real life, I think every single time I have ever heard anyone use the term twin flame is when they try to explain a very abusive relationship, like either to themselves or to other people. When it's like, oh yeah, but everything is horrible, but we're twin flames, so we're still together. Yeah. So when somebody uses that term, run like hell.
Yes, do. And the crazy thing, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but I think also this shows how crazy this whole concept of this twin flaming is, or like not the concept of twin flaming, but of that cult, is that they tell people, oh, well, every twin flame relationship consists of a divine female and a divine male, but then they just tell people you are actually the divine male, but that person was born a woman and identified as a woman and never thought about transitioning, and yet then they tell them you have to transition, and people who never even questioned their gender and their sex transition and like go through surgery, and it's just horrible what it does for the trans community as well. Like, it's just there's so much wrong with this.
That is absolutely crazy. Well, I'm not there yet, so I've only watched one episode, and there were a couple of things that I already found shocking. For example, there's this woman who she broke up with an ex, and then they tell her, oh yeah, your ex is your twin flame, which of course is what you want to hear when you're going through that heartbreak. Like, you want you want someone to tell you, like, oh, we know that you're meant to be with this person. And then he has like a restraining order against her and everything. And he puts all of these boundaries in place. And she literally gets told, yeah, those don't exist. Like, you completely have to ignore that and keep going and stalk him, basically. And then there's this 19-year-old girl who is just so creeped out by this guy. But they're all like, no, you're twin flames. You have to be together. Like, it's absolutely crazy. And then also, this is so fascinating because it's like, of course, these people are very vulnerable, but also they just want love at the end of the day. And like, that's how, many people feel. And I was also thinking, like, as an 18 or 19-year-old woman, that shit would have worked on me. I mean, not to that to those extreme like measures or anything, but if then somebody would have told me like, okay, I'm this person who just has this spiritual gift and I can just confirm to you that you're meant to be with this person and you just need to keep trying, like, I would have bought that because again, that's what you want to hear in that moment. It is so it's insane.
They're literally just feeding off the vulnerability of these people, and it's not just the emotional damage they do. They like get financial damage because they have to take up loans because once you're in that culty thing, you have to become a coach yourself and work yourself up that ladder, and you have to pay for each coaching session. And the people who own this, they're literally millionaires, and such a creepy couple. Anyway, go watch it. It is wild. It is wild.
I also started a new podcast. I don't know why this turned into like a recommendations corner now, but someone at work recommended it, and I'm very, very late to this party because it was a massive hype a couple of years ago. It's called My Dad Wrote a Porno. Have you heard of it?
Oh. I've heard of it. I've never listened to it. I think I should. I always keep thinking I should, but then I just never do. Don't know why.
It's hysterical. So basically, it's this guy, like an adult man, and his dad one day just came up to him and was like, "Here, I wrote a book. Is it good? Like, please read it and let me know if it's good." And he starts reading it and he realizes, oh my God, this is porno. And he thought that the best thing to do would be get two of his friends together and read it. So they read one chapter every episode and they talk about it. It's absolutely hysterical.
I really do need to. I need to start that.
Yeah, I was just giggling in the middle of the streets. I love that kind of stuff as well. Just the fact that the dad is like completely okay with that. The mom apparently was less of a fan, but then she was very intrigued eventually. So yeah, and it did so well. It was such a big hype. I think it only recently ended because it went for like a couple of years. So yeah, I just started, but I love it.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I will keep that in mind. Because it's nice to mix up the true crime a little bit, isn't it?
I think I definitely overdosed.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need something else now.
I need something good. Yeah. I feel you. But well, talking about podcasts, should we get into our episode?
Yeah, because we have something as well.
Yes.
We're not just here to recommend others. So they can be heart-shattering. They can feel like the rug is pulled from under you. They hurt just as much as breakups with romantic partners do. And in many ways, it's worse, because here there's no Spotify account playlist that describes exactly what you're going through. There are no books or sitcoms that tell you what to do in this situation. And there is nobody who comes over with a tub of ice cream to help you through it. And in most cases, you're not even exactly sure how you got to this point. In this episode, we talk about friendship breakups.
Yes, we will look into questions like, is there a right way to end a friendship? Or why do we feel ashamed when a friendship ends? And what about ghosting? Also, that was beautifully written, Gladys, that intro. I loved it.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, the sting of a friendship breakup can hit you really hard. And like you just said, it can be as hard as a romantic relationship that ends, if not even worse, because we are not really open about those friendship breakups and how they impact us and how they be confusing and uncomfortable. Okay, so for this episode, I tried something a little bit different. I was thinking if I could call a hotline and ask for advice, like an agony aunt, what questions would I ask when it's about friendship breakups, if I would be going through one, if I'm going through one, And I thought we can both just answer these questions for ourselves, make it a little therapy session again, maybe, and answer the questions for our listeners who maybe want the same advice that we wish we had, as our intro says. So I guess the first one I have is already quite a big one, namely, when is it time to break up with a friend? Do you want to go first, or should I?
Well, I can go, I think. I haven't prepared this.
You're gonna wing it.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna wing it. Uh, I think I would say when you feel like, I think a friendship or any relationship should make you feel better as a person. And I mean, of course, you can go through rough patches and everything, but I feel like if when you add everything up, it is causing you more stress and like if the negative feelings kind of start outweighing the goods, if you feel like even if you're going through challenges and everything, but you still feel like, okay, but the love we still have for each other and when we're together and everything, it's still worth it, then I feel like, okay, then try and make it work. But I feel like when you've gotten to a point where it's like it's more hassle than it's worth, basically. Yeah, that's put in a very like cut and dry way, but
No,
I think it's just a feeling. It's just if it makes you feel more drained than anything else, then it's probably time to let go.
I agree. Because like I said, this is basically my notes. I had some time to really go into detail with this answer. And I'm just going to say to you, and there's also a shout out in there for you. So stay tuned. But I would say for me, it's time for a friendship breakup. It's when I don't feel safe to be vulnerable anymore. And when there is no space for fun and laughter, and when there's a lack of understanding. Because actually, before our last episode, I asked one of my friends what expectations she has for a friendship. And one of the things she says was there needs to be fun and laughter involved, because our every day can be so draining with like work and all the things we have to juggle. So that's just kind of a big thing. And I think that's actually true. And then also there needs to be understanding. So when there's a lack of understanding just of you, then and how you tick and what you do, then that's kind of a sign as well. And I think that's basically what you said. When you feel uncomfortable to open up to them, when you feel more drained and anxious about the friendship, then it's definitely time to let it go. And also another part, and that's less like someone's doing something wrong. I think that is literally just the fact that people can grow into different directions. But I think if someone can't relate to the me I am now, like Isabella as a 29-year-old, and where I'm currently at in my life, and if you like unwilling to get to know me as my me now, or just can't relate to me anymore, then maybe it's time to split. Well, not split ways, but I think this could be one of those occasions where things just fizzle out. But we get to that later as well. Oh yeah, that's basically my definition. But then I also realized I have a really big ick. I can get a really big ick from some people. That's a very personal thing, but it does make me step back from friendships. And that is when you're rarely being heard. And with that, I mean in a quite literal way. Like when you are the one that's expected to listen and support, but when you then start talking about something that's important to you, or just an interest of yours, or just talk about your life, and then you're just constantly being interrupted while you are talking, or that it's just obvious that the other person is quiet because they're just waiting to talk again, or when the other person just stares at their phone, scrolls while you talk, it really gives me the ick. It's such a big turn off. And this is where I want to shout you out, Gladys. Because I even said that to my boyfriend before, that there aren't as many people as you, like you, that show such a genuine interest as you do when someone talks to you. Like, it's not just me, but whatever I tell you, you can start a whole conversation about it. You don't just go, oh, well, okay, but actually yesterday I had pasta for dinner. Like, and with some people, conversations can feel like that. And also when I see you talk to other people, like, you're so interested in what I have to say. I think that's really nice. And it's a talent in a way as well.
That is so sweet. That's so that. And I mean, you have told me that before, and I don't know if I see myself like that. Like sometimes I feel a bit guilty about almost maybe not showing enough interest or something, because there's this thing, what they say, that some people are listeners and some people are talkers. I think of myself as a talker.
I think you're a talker, but like in a good way. Like I can tell you something and then you have a story that you can tell in relation to it, and then you can relate to each other's situations in a way, or you just ask the right questions when you don't have a story. So I think that's really nice. Like,
Oh my
are you
god,
tearing
okay.
up?
Cute. It's just very nice.
I thought I'll drop that here because I know one of your love languages is words.
Yes, it is. It is. It's my number one love
There you
language. Oh my god. Okay. Well, thank you. That's very sweet. And I feel that way with you as well. I mean, there's a reason why you're like one of the I think maybe two people who I send like 20-minute voice notes to just talk about the most ridiculous or trivial thing when I'm frustrated about something, because I know that you will actually listen and like reply.
Sometimes a bit later, but
yeah. And then you also address like the things I said and not just one thing and then kind of like, oh well, whatever. Like you actually go in depth about it, which I really love.
Thank you.
So
look at all that cheese dripping down this microphone.
I know. Oh my god, let's move on from this.
This is not a nice episode.
We're sickening.
This is a sad one.
Well, because I was, as we said last week, we read the book Friendaholic by Elizabeth Day, and there's a couple of chapters there as well about like growing apart, breaking up, all of those things. And in that book, it said, well, first of all, something that I thought was an interesting, I don't know, statistic or number was Jeffrey Hall from the University of Kansas said, he did research and basically came up with the conclusion that it takes around 200 hours of investments to make someone from a stranger into a good friend, which I really liked, because that kind of, to our points last week about where we said, not everyone is a friend, and it's not because you've gone for drinks twice that they're a good friend. Well, this kind of backs that up. So I'm happy to read that. Because it is an actual relationship that you need to invest in, just like you don't go into being boyfriend and girlfriend from one day. Well, at least I don't. into like a romantic relationship. Like you need time. And then he also said that, and then the book kind of goes into that a little bit as well, that basically you have layers of friends, or like kind of like an onion. You have like a very close, if like apparently you have like 1 to 2 best friends, and then you have about 5 good friends, or like maximum 5, let's say. Like you have the capacity to have 5 really good friends, and then you have around, then I think it was something like 15 to 20 like people that you know and are in touch with regularly. And it kind of addressed how like you don't have the capacity, like we said last week as well, to invest the same in every friendship, so that you automatically will have these like categories. Well, this sounds very
that makes sense,
theoretical, but like this hierarchy almost. And I feel like I definitely have that, but I also feel like people consider that weird if you say that. But I've always been like, I mean, I don't consider everyone as like, I can have several friends, but we don't all have the same relationship, obviously. And then I also read, and that's something I did not like to hear, but it said that when we enter a romantic relationship, because that takes up so much energy and like resources, that we must make space and will inevitably also lose friends, which I don't know if that's true, but I think it does make sense that if someone enters your life and takes up that much space all of a sudden, then you don't have an unlimited amount of like energy and time. But for me personally, I haven't lost friends since my relationship started. I hope people don't feel differently, but then most of my friends also live abroad, so then maybe that's just I can count on one hand the people I hang out with in the UK.
Yeah.
So maybe that's also, I still have the capacity to have those relationships in the UK because it's not that many.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And especially the category part as well. I don't know when I read this or heard about this, not for this research, but it was basically like you can't have one friend that does it all for you, if that makes sense. Like you have work friends. Some people have work friends. Then you have the going out friends. Then you have those friends that you call when you need support, the more caring ones. Like it can't be all in one person. That's why, yes, you can have a romantic relationship and a partner gives you a lot, but he can't or they shouldn't be you shouldn't put the pressure on that person to be everything for you. Yeah.
No, exactly. And then I also was thinking about like how, and Elizabeth Day mentions that in the book a little bit as well. There's this idea, and I have definitely been a bit naive about this in the past as well. My cat is scratching the door. Please ignore that. But there is this idea that friendship should withstand everything, and almost kind of like you said, like it almost shouldn't change over the years or anything. Like it should almost be seen as something that is never impacted by anything else that is going on in your life, and it should just be something that just remains the same all the time. And that is just not how it works, I think, because if your lives change, like you grow up, you move out, you move to a different country, you get married, you have a baby, like your friendship will inevitably change. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But, and maybe this is a little bit of a hot take, I don't know, but I also don't really agree with the thing that people say all the time, which is that thing of like, real friendships will not be affected by any changes. That thing of like, a real friend will have an unlimited amount of empathy and understanding for those changes. And I don't agree with that. And I was thinking about, okay, maybe that idea comes from society that tells us that friendship is less important than like romantic relationships or relationships with family members, so that our friendships are just the first thing that can kind of be put on the back burner for a bit when other things are going on, and that everyone has to be okay with that. And of course, there will be times in your life when you just have less time, like if a parent needs care or if you just had a child or whatever. Like there are circumstances where, of course, your friends should understand this. But then also, on the other hand, in a friendship, you need attention and you need to feel like you matter just as much. So no, I actually don't think that if a person clearly doesn't see you as a priority anymore, or if all of a sudden there's just very long gaps, that you can't be hurt by that. And I feel like there is almost that message of like, yeah, but if you're a good friend, you will understand and you won't be hurt by that. I feel like no,
if you're good friends, you still somehow make it clear that you think of them. Like you can say, like we said, you can say everything's so busy, I do still love you, I do think about you, I'm just really taken up by, I don't know, caring for my parent or whatever you have to go through.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, more for the two of us than for the imaginary agony aunt. And the question is, have you ever had a friendship breakup? And I think I'm just going to answer that first, because my answer is probably going to be quite a bit shorter than yours. I know you read about it, not because you're an expert in friendship breakups. So I'd say there was a friendship breakup, or actually two friendship breakups all in one, while I was actually going through my breakup with my ex. So when we were together, my ex and I, we had those two friends that she knew before me. I met them through her, and they were a couple as well. And we just ended up hanging out a lot. We did a lot of things together, the four of us, sometimes just like two of us. Like it was nice friendships that we had, and it was quite intense, I would say, but we had a lot of fun. And then those two broke up, and then shortly after, me and my ex broke up. And mixed within all the layers of a breakup in general, like a romantic breakup, I had that breakup of the friendships. And I think I didn't realize until I was out of it that actually impacted me a lot as well. Like just losing two friends that I was so close by. It wasn't just a fizzling out. I had to actively take a step back because it became too much for me. Hearing through them what's going on with the other one, and then seeing pictures of my ex with that one friend that just recently hung out with me, and just created this whole web of complications. So I just had to step back. That was that one. And then I also had probably one or two friendships that like fizzled out after I moved to the UK. There was no malice. There was nothing bad. Again, literally, they just fizzled out. It just happened. But sometimes I think if I were to move back, we probably would be able to like start seeing each other and be friends, or like friendly with each other again, and maybe even meet up for coffees and stuff. I just think in this case, the distance was just too much of a stretch for that friendship muscle. So, what about you? Do you have any friendship breakup experiences?
Well, this is an interesting question. And I was actually, well, you've only had like a few situations where this has happened, where like and sometimes I feel like, is it normal that I've had like quite a few friendships end? But then I also think I've had, like, without wanting to sound, I don't know, like, I can't help it that I'm so popular, to quote Gretchen Wieners. I think I have had quite a few friends. Like, I do always have like several friends. So then I guess it's also not weird that in 30 years, like, quite a few of those have ended. But yeah, I've had friendships end in like so many different scenarios that I actually have a completely different section about this. So I'll just get into that in a bit. But I can answer this with like by talking about like, have I had a friendship that has ended in that, like, okay, this is it now, we don't want to be friends anymore type of way. And I've had that once, I think. And you know this story already, but I'll give you this example. So I had a friend who I had been friends with for about 10 years. And one day, out of absolutely nowhere, she said some off the wall racist stuff. And in that moment, I'm going somewhere with this. This is not just an anecdote, but in that moment, I was so flabbergasted because, I'd known her for a while. Like, I just had not seen this coming. So in that moment, I just said something along the lines of like, that's a very problematic thing to say or something. But then I went home and this was like quite heavy on my mind. And I knew immediately that I couldn't continue that friendship because it also wasn't ignorance or anything. Like, it was how she felt in her soul. And like, she said it with her whole chest. So I was extremely shocked as well. And maybe that just speaks to my privilege, but we had like conversations about racism and everything as well. And she had never really expressed any of that. So that just made me think, okay, what have I done to make her seem like she can just say that to me and I will agree with this, or I will find that normal or whatever. So a couple of days later, I sent her like a very long message where I explained that I just would not be able to get over that. And it did not go well. Like, she got very defensive and she basically was like, how dare you imply that I'm racist and that I think these things? When I was like, I'm not implying anything. I'm literally quoting what you said back to you. But so then she said that she was done with me as well for other reasons, like how I hadn't been making the same effort anymore and everything, which was true because even before that, I had kind of started feeling like, yeah, we don't really have that much to talk about anymore or something. Anyway, that was that friendship done. But the interesting thing was when I told people this, the amount of people who said things like, oh, yeah, well, I maybe wouldn't have ended a friendship over this, but I know that you have quite strong principles. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know about you, but I'm friends with someone because I like who they are as a person. If it then turns out that they're a white supremacist, I don't like who they are anymore. Like, how is that an extreme reaction? And that really made me think about like how so many people just kind of swipe things under the rug when it comes to especially like political views and just like problematic or just bigotry, how they, I mean, I just really, and like, I don't want to be like on a high horse here or be like, oh, I'm doing everything perfectly, but I cannot imagine being like, oh, well, okay, you clearly hate people of color, but I'm white, so no problem, let's just continue. And it's the same thing, for example, with how many straight people will be friends with people or will be partners, will be in romantic relationships, and we talked about this, with people who they know have homophobic views and everything, because they're like, well, we don't have to discuss this because like we're both straight, so that's absolutely fine. Let's just kind of avoid this topic. And like, apart from the fact that that's just kind of fucked up in general, also, for example, for me, like, how could I on the one hand say, oh, I want to be an ally and work on my own racial bias and try and understand like my best friend's experiences, for example, and respect her, while at the same time being close to someone who feels that way about people like my best friend. Like, that just did not make any sense to me. But I felt like because I told people that we had ended it in such a like obvious, clear, like, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore way, people thought that was very weird, almost as if like you're not supposed to do that with friends. But I was like, why? If you don't want to be friends anymore in such a way, and it's so extreme, then yeah. I mean, I feel like in some cases you absolutely have to maybe end it in a very clear, like, I don't want to be friends anymore way. If you feel like
you have your values that you want to protect as well, and it's just such a mismatch of values that is a very valid reason to directly end the friendship, and also in that way show the person you really think this is not right to be like that, to say these things, and just distance you from them. And I think I don't get why other people wouldn't understand that, especially with a thing like that, with that reason.
But of course, I would say in friendships that's kind of the exception, this very hard, clear ending, because also, yeah, most of the time friendships don't really end like that. And we talked about this, it gets very, most of the time it just gets a little bit messy or awkward, or you don't really know where you stand anymore. And of course, when a friendship falls by the wayside, it doesn't always mean that it was bad. Sometimes it just doesn't fit anymore, just like a romantic relationship. Like, sometimes you just, yeah, like you said, sometimes you're a different person now than you were a couple of years ago, and sometimes that is just not a match anymore. But then I think, because I was kind of thinking about like, when would it be a breakup, and when would it just be that friendship changes and you're both okay with that? So because with one friend, it's maybe not weird if there are longer gaps sometimes, whereas with others, it would be weird. Like, if my best friend and I all of a sudden went from talking every day to talking every other week, that would still be more frequent than I talk to some of my other friends. But I would see that as, are we growing apart? Because this is just very different from what we're used to. And then, yeah, that's not necessarily bad. But I think probably the biggest like heartbreak happens when one friend still thinks everything is the same, or everything should be the same, or is desperately trying for it to stay the same, when the other person is clearly okay with the friendship changing or even fizzling out a bit. And yeah, like when one person still wants to be as close as you once were and the other does not. Because yeah, the best case scenario is that you both grow apart at the same time, and that you both feel it and you're both okay with it. And you both, talking about these categories again, like maybe you both have put each other in a different category than you used to. But again, we don't have that language. Like you said last week, we don't have that language. We don't have those guidelines. And we can't, it's not normal in a friendship to say, oh, you used to be one of my closest friends, but now our circumstances have just led to you having moved into that outer circle a little bit more. Like, that is just not something that is socially accepted to say. So there is no socially accepted language, which means it gets very awkward.
Yes, it really does, which would actually be, if you don't mind, quite a good segue into a question for the agony aunt, for the imaginary agony aunt. And it would basically be like, okay, we have broken up. What now? And I think that really depends on, and we're going to hear more about that from your side as well, how you ended that friendship. But like, when a romantic relationship ends, it's quite standard for exes to discuss the rules of their breakup, right? It's like, they either decide to remain friends, or like be just friendly with each other, or to completely cut ties, or to just respectfully smile and talk should they see each other in social situations. But yeah, like you just said, like we said many times, that type of conversation doesn't happen when two friends end a friendship. And that then leads to confusion and can make things very uncomfortable, especially if you share a group of friends. Like, if there wasn't any communication about the friendship ending and it did just fiddle out, but like you said, worst case scenario, you are in that situation where one friend still wants to try and the other friend just ignores them or ghosts them or whatever. Let's say the scenario is one friend wants to just be out of this friendship, the other one is still contacting that friend, that gives you as the person who wants to get out there the option to just be honest, because it will make it a lot easier to meet up in a social situation. But then also, if you both have just let it fiddle out and you feel a bit weird now and anxious,
fizzle out.
Oh my god,
fiddle is
fiddle. Yeah.
Is a musical instrument.
Sorry, fizzle. If it has fizzled out and both of you are fine with that, but you feel uncomfortable of meeting now at that person's birthday, I don't know, then take it as an opportunity to reach out and say, by the way, things have been a bit weird. Like, you don't have to message beforehand. You can just on the party if you have the balls. Because I think I would be way too anxious. I would be more like the message kind of person to like check in, see if we can be fine anyway, if it's all good. Like, just use those opportunities and make life for yourself a little bit easier. But yeah, I think after you have that friendship breakup happened, it can be quite complicated because there aren't these rules that you have with your ex usually.
Yeah, I think you said something very interesting there, which is if you're the person who wants that distance or who just doesn't want to be in that friendship anymore, that's your opportunity to then be honest. But and also kind of, I read about this in the book and everything as well. And it actually did give me some insight a little bit into this and like the different scenarios that happen, because sometimes I also feel like realistically, like, is that always the thing to do? Or like, I mean, in theory, yes, it is the thing to do. But then I've also been in situations where I have taken more and more distance, and where I almost thought like having here's why I no longer want to be friends would have just like having that conversation would have just led to a fight or to some back and forth. And then that just also leaves a very bad aftertaste as well. So like in the book, Elizabeth says that maybe sometimes the kindest thing to do is just kind of let it fizzle out. But then, of course, yeah, that's tricky when one person wants to let it fizzle out and the other person thinks you're still super close friends. Like, that is very difficult. But yeah, and so I've been thinking about the different scenarios in which my friendships have ended.
Yes. So with the having the conversation, like, you are the friend that wants to end the friendship with that person. But let's say you are in a friend group. I think if you would have the conversation, it could leave not just a bitter taste for that friend you're breaking up with, but also for the rest of the people within the friend group. Like, it can't just be because it's not a common thing to do this. People might just be like, this is really rude. And hence you're going to lose more than that one friend you actually wanted to distance yourself from. It's just a really complicated area to be in. So I think what you just said about Elizabeth Day, that the easiest and the nicest way, the kindest way to do it is letting it fizzle out. I actually think it's very controversial, it's very conflicting with like what I want to say, but also how it then is in real life. Like, the fizzling out sometimes just makes the most sense, but then I also like clear lines, so it's kind of, yeah, it's not easy.
No, so much, because then also, let's say, yes, in like more like a friend group, or even, yeah, exactly, you might feel like, you can't really have that conversation because then it will just go into like a back and forth and be like a fight maybe or whatever, and then there will be that very nasty feeling afterwards, and then you maybe have mutual friends or whatever. But then, of course, for then that other person, it must be so painful as well to feel like, oh, but why are they still close friends with like our mutual friends, and then why are they taking distance from me? And then so in that situation, you do want to know, like, you do want that clear answer. So it is such a thing where like it is kind of similar to romantic breakups, where it's like almost like there is that idea that if you get broken up with, you feel like, oh, I want closure. Like, I need closure. I need to know exactly why. But there's always an element of you will never have all of those answers. You will never know exactly why. And with friendships, even more so, because yeah, there is no clear, acceptable language. Which then brings me to the thing that happens often to like maybe sometimes to extreme degrees, maybe sometimes not. Ghosting. So ghosting, a little definition for those who don't know. Ghosting is described as the practice of suddenly ending all communication and avoiding all contact with that person and not replying anymore to any attempts at contact. And it is known as this horrible thing that like it makes you a coward and you just simply do not do that. So I really spent the past week thinking about like, okay, then what do you do? Like considering we lack any type of socially accepted language for friendships, how do you end a friendship? Like what is the best way? Because yeah, like we said, there is often no I want to break up now conversation, which I think is fitting in some circumstances. But then in other cases, yeah, telling each other exactly, hey, I don't want to be like, okay, fine, I don't have an issue with you, I'm not angry at you, but I don't want to be friends anymore for these reasons. I almost feel like, yeah, that would just be cruel sometimes as well. So then let me take you through how some of my friendships have ended. So I have had it where a friend who I used to meet up with like twice a week, all of a sudden just didn't really tell me anything, but all of a sudden just didn't have time anymore, always had an excuse every single time. And I very much just got the feeling that she didn't want to hang out with me anymore. But she never really said it directly. It was just always like, oh yeah, I'm too busy now, or like, oh, I don't have the money to go out for drinks. But then I was like, yeah, but I can just come over to yours, like that's fine. But then she just always came up with an excuse. And I didn't understand because that when we just went there almost overnight, I felt like, but maybe she didn't feel that way. But yeah, you don't know these things. So I was offended because she was stringing me along and I eventually stopped trying. But in that moment, I very much also looking back now at this friendship, I always felt like she should have told me directly. But then I also had a friend who did tell me directly, and that wasn't necessarily better. Like we had been friends for over 10 years. We had gone to New York together not that long before this, actually, and to like help her get over a breakup and everything. And we didn't meet up every week, but we did have a special relationship, I thought. Like we had gone through a lot of things growing up together, like troubles with our parents, like whatever. And one day I just asked to meet up. Like we hadn't really spoken for a couple of weeks, but I thought that was normal because that's just kind of the place that we had gotten to. And she sent me a message back that in a very friendly way said that she did not have that need anymore because she wanted to spend time on her new relationship and on her closest friends and family. And I, again, was extremely offended as well because I assumed that I was also in that closer friend circle. So that made me feel very bitter as well. So it's kind of like she did tell me directly and I was just as hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine I'd be hurt by both as well. Obviously, both is painful. That's the thing, though. Is there, in general, a way to break up with someone in a nice... Like, there's no way to break up with someone to leave them feel good in romantic relationships or friendships, in any kind of relationship, really. But I guess with the friendship ones, I could insert another question here, where I actually have some kind of answer from a clinical therapist who specializes in young adult and adult friendships. Okay. The question I would have here is, why do we feel so ashamed about friendship breakups? Because I think that is one of the big differences between a romantic breakup and a friendship breakup. It's kind of like a shame that comes with it. Just like we said last time when we mentioned that having just a small group of friends or just one friend kind of makes people feel a bit embarrassed, or like when you just have a phase in your life where you don't have any close friends, which shouldn't be a thing. You should not be embarrassed about this. But yes, so this clinical therapist...
Can I like, I don't know, have a guess and then you can tell me the right answer?
Yeah, it's not like a mind-blowing new revolution. Is that okay. The word? Yeah, well, but go ahead.
I'm very interested to hear this because I would think that the reason why we feel this way, also based on like how I have felt when friendships have ended or how people have reacted when friendships have ended, I think, again, it's because society places friendships like below relationships with family members and romantic relationships. I feel like with romantic relationships, there is that idea of like, yeah, it takes work. And so it's normal if it doesn't work out. Whereas with friends, I feel like there's this idea of like, yeah, but it's easy. Like it doesn't really require that much effort. So why can you not just stay friends with someone? Like why does it have to be such a thing or something? I feel like I was thinking about this, and I think for me that would maybe be it, because there is that idea of like, what do you mean you can't just keep being friends with this person? Like, why does it have to be such a massive issue? Because friends are, it's just casual, it's just chill. So I don't know. You tell me, enlighten me.
Well, I think what you said is a really good answer for this. And I think there's several answers and different reasons for everyone why they feel ashamed too. Her answer, I'm just going to read, it's from the Times where she gave an interview. So I'm just going to read that paragraph to everyone. But I think if I would summarize it, it's mainly also just because there's a lack of representation of this. But so I'm just going to let you know what she said. We feel ashamed that we couldn't make the friendship work. People feel like they should have figured this out and assume that everyone else has figured this out. And with figured this out, she means like friendships, having a friendship in general. So people breaking up with friends feels like they're doing something wrong. Since friendship breakups aren't discussed nearly as often as romantic ones, she says that people in friendship breakups can feel like they are the only ones struggling with it. They're the only ones struggling to actually make a friendship work. And rather than seeking support and advice from other friends, people are more likely to keep it to themselves. This can make them feel even more isolated. And there's also a common expectation that not every romantic relationship will last forever. And she says that we need to expect the same of friendships in order to normalize this experience. The end of a friendship does not mean one or both friends are bad people or bad friends. She says it simply just means that the relationship wasn't working. And I think that is very well put, because you don't really go to a friend and be like, oh, this friend is not texting me back. Like, you never hear that from anyone, really.
No, yeah, okay. That makes perfect sense. Yes. I agree. There definitely is that idea that it should be, well, that's basically what I said. No, it's not.
Yeah,
but
it is.
that it should be like effortless. That it should be like, come on, like why can you not just, do this? And
And I think people think that to themselves, though. It's not even other people thinking that. It's just because there's no discussions about this. People are like, it's just me. I'm the one that can't make it work, but everyone else has no problems with it. So here we are, millennial musings, sharing it so no one has to feel alone. I mean, that's what we wanted the podcast for, isn't it? So people can feel relatable, like feel something to relate to. Hear something to relate to, sorry. And like not feel alone with it.
Yes, Isabella just knocked her mic over. Is that a sentence? I don't know. Yeah, exactly. We see you, we hear you. So I wanted to, because I kind of introduced the term ghosting in this conversation, but then I haven't really discussed it that much. So I did want to talk about that a little bit more as well, because by far for me the like friendship breakup that hurt the most and was the most painful for me was when I got ghosted in quite an extreme way, as in like this was a person that I considered a very, very close friend, and like we wouldn't talk every week necessarily, but she would sometimes message me. We lived in the same city, so she would message me sometimes like, hey, do you feel like coming over tonight? I would go over there and I would stay there until like the morning, literally just all night, just talking. And that was just very normal for us. I also very much felt like there was never any like pressure or never anything of like, oh, we have to see each other this often or whatever. I felt like it was very effortless and we could both just be honest with each other and everything. So a couple of days before my 25th birthday party that she helped organize, which is also interesting, I was there. So the party was on a Saturday. I was at hers on like a Tuesday, I think. And we literally said like, okay, see you Saturday. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to this. And I never saw her again. Like, she did not show up. She never replied to any of my messages. Like, it was literally overnight that this happened. And I felt like people were kind of, when I told other people, because I like, this was very painful for me, and honestly I think a little bit traumatic as well. Like, this has definitely left some scars for me. But people, like my other friends and everything, were shocked. They were like, oh my god, like, who would do something like that? But then they were also very much like, well, you know, friendships end, like basically telling me that I should just kind of get over it. And like, it really, really hurts. And then I think, would it have hurt? Maybe it would have, I don't know, but you know, because I always feel like you always want the scenario that you didn't get. But then I felt like it maybe would have hurt just as much if she would have immediately like told me directly, like, I don't want this anymore, or whatever. I think with ghosting, what makes it worse is kind of the embarrassment and the feeling that the other person has all the control and you have no idea what's going on, and you like desperately want those answers. But then I also have to, well, make a very big I don't know, admission here in this. Is that the word? A confession. I'll say it again. But I also have to confess that I have ghosted as well. Not, I wouldn't say to that degree. I think that was quite extreme, but I have, and I kind of mentioned this last week as well, but I have definitely stopped replying to people that I didn't really consider a close friend, or we had already gotten to the part where it wasn't weird to like not talk for 6 months or something, which then also made me think, if you look at that definition of ghosting, which is the practice of suddenly ending all communication, but then it's almost like, but if it's already normal to not speak for 6 months, then are you suddenly ending all communication if there's barely any communication to begin with, you know? So that's maybe a question. But then, yeah, I've had it where, like I said, I just, we got to the point already where just we didn't really talk sometimes for just months and months and months. And then they would reach out or like ask to hang out or something, and I just didn't have that need anymore. And then this is something, and I'm not saying this is good, I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but then it feels very awkward because there is absolutely no way that you can say that you don't have that need anymore to hang out with that person without sounding like an absolute dickhead. So then that is something that I really struggle with. And if someone has the right answer to this, tell me, because then, yeah, like, yeah, I don't know. That's definitely what I have had as well. And like I said in last week's episode, of course, ignoring someone and ignoring someone's messages is not nice. I'm not saying it is. And it's never from a thing of like, oh, I will never reply to this person. Haha. Like, it is usually that I get overwhelmed very easily. So what happens a lot is that I'm like, this message comes in or whatever, and I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't really expecting this, so I need to reply to this, but first I need to get my thoughts sorted. And then it goes on for a bit, and then, you know, often they start messaging more and more, which then turns it into this big thing. And Elizabeth, they actually, and this made me feel so seen, she actually said the same thing. Then like it turns into a bigger thing where you feel like, oh, now I need to really explain myself. Like, now this has turned into a thing. Actually, from a person with, like, with all due respect, I thought that we didn't really have any expectations of each other anymore, and like now I'm expected to explain myself, and now it might turn into this whole back and forth. And then sometimes you just don't really have, I don't know, like the energy to get into that, or sometimes you just want to avoid that, which again, I'm not saying is good or is nice, but I think that just it just happens.
It really does. I actually read in the New York Times an article about ghosting, and they done a study in 2018, and that research suggests that being ghosted by a friend is quite common. In that study, it was like a couple of thousand people, and like 40% of the participants said that they've been ghosted by a friend. And then one of the professors at the St. Mary's College of Maryland, who was an author of that study, explained that there's like a certain impact, like things that happen when someone gets ghosted, like psychologically, because there are 4 fundamental needs that get threatened. Number one would be your sense of belonging gets threatened. Number 2 is your sense of a meaningful existence, so that you have a place in the world, a place where you like feel like you're meant to be and you belong to. And then the third is your sense of control. Like you said, like it's out of your control. That person just decided to do this and you have no control over their friendship. And then lastly, number 4, your self-esteem, because you start questioning yourself, like, what have I done? So being ghosted is horrible, but then I would say a lot of people probably already have ghosted as well. And I think it's really interesting what you said with like let's say in that relationship you haven't spoken for 6 months now. Like, is it really ghosting when you then don't reply? Or is it actually really the point where it's not as rude to say, look, it's been 6 months since we've talked. That need has kind of disappeared. I have moved on, because you would do that with a romantic partner, to bring it back to that comparison. But, yeah,
I know, but I really struggle with that because I just get so anxious about that. Then I'm just like, yeah, but then what if they get back to me and they just are very offended, and then which I know it would probably still be the better thing to do. But yeah, I do also want to say though, something I have learned, and then also after that experience where I got ghosted in that way, I have also learned that if someone wants to reach out to you, they will. Because when I got ghosted by that friend, I definitely started like chasing her and started messaging her like via text, on WhatsApp, on Facebook. And I also, now I feel like I wouldn't do that anymore, because by not communicating, that is kind of expressing something as well.
Yeah, not saying anything often says enough, right? So
yes, so I feel like then you should also probably accept that. Like in this day and age, if somebody hasn't replied on WhatsApp or on whatever, then there's no need to also start messaging them on IG, on Facebook, send an email, like whatever. Then I would say, yeah, leave it. Because if that other person is anything like, again, just being honest here, like if that other person is anything like me, all you're doing with that is making them extremely anxious and not any more likely to reach out now that it has turned into such a big thing. Like the people who have messaged me and I never got back to them, I think about that every single day. I feel anxious about that every single day. Does that mean I will? And I probably should reach out and be like, hey, I'm sorry. I just wasn't, I don't know, mature enough, or I just wasn't confident enough to say this directly, the thing that you said about like, I don't really have that need anymore. But now I feel like it has turned into too big of a thing. And of course, it's like you said earlier, if we do run into each other, it will be really awkward. And that will be my fault, because I should have just gotten back to them. But again, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It is so, like I said, like when you're on that side, I understand, because like I said, I've been there, I've done that as well. And I completely understand how you're not doing it from a place of like, oh, I really want to hurt this person, or I don't care about this person anymore. But then when you're on the other side, it is so painful as well. And it's just, we just don't have any guidelines, like you said last week, to help you navigate that situation. So I've kind of, been thinking about this the past couple of weeks, and it has definitely helped me see things from a couple of different perspectives. And also just, again, something that we really lack when it comes to friendships, hear that other people have been there as well, that I'm not the only one who does these things. I'm not the only one who hasn't always responded in the most mature way. And I think that really helps as well to hear like, okay, this is a human thing to do, and it is very awkward, and it does get gray very often, and there isn't one right thing to do. And yeah, so until I don't know, recently, maybe a couple of years ago, I would have said, yeah, a friendship always deserves that ending and closure, and knowing exactly why. But I've since realized that that is just most of the time not the case. And I have definitely not always given that as well. So, yeah, in reality, there are just so many reasons why a friendship might end. And yeah, for example, I've had it with a friendship that I realized wasn't healthy for me, and I couldn't grow as a person anymore and be close to them at the same time. So I had started taking like more and more distance, and eventually there was no big breakup moment. And I felt guilty after that because I was like, am I being a coward now for not telling them, okay, this is it for me? Just so you know, for me, this friendship is over. Like, does that make me a coward that I didn't do this? But then I thought, and again, like reading about this and everything these past couple of weeks have helped with that as well, to realize, no, it was a long time coming. They actually never reached out anymore either. So clearly they saw it coming as well. And maybe that was just the best thing for both of us, to just leave it, because a message with, here are all the reasons why this is not healthy for me, that would have not led to anything productive for either of us. So like, I am not advocating for like letting things fizzle out or like ghosting is like the best solution. Absolutely not. But I have realized that there is not one right and not one wrong way to do this. Because it is just, we just don't have the language. And we learned that with romantic relationships, there has to be a clear conversation to end it, but there is also a clear conversation at the start. And with friendships, there's neither. And that just makes it very different. And that makes every friendship different as well.
And I feel like as children, it's so easy because you're like, you're my best friend now. And then I feel like as children, I've had conversations where I'm like, I don't want to play with you anymore. Like, you're so direct and it's so clear. I miss those types of friendships.
Maybe we
children, we should just start doing that again. Hey, I like your glasses. Let's be friends.
Maybe we should bring that back. I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, not playing anymore. We get Goodbye. Oh God, no. Yeah, I think the fact that there's just no, like you said, there's no clear starting point. There's no clear end. And I really don't want to seem like I haven't figured out, because like I said last time, I feel like I'm in my shedding era, not my shedding friends era, just shedding my 20s era. But like, I'm trying to figure a lot of things out, figure out which relationships I want to invest in. I mean, I guess maybe I am. I don't know. You can interpret this as you want. I'm just trying to figure things out and where my energy goes. And it's really hard. Like, it's so, like, I don't know how to do things either. I don't know if fizzling out is the best way. It's definitely the most comfortable way because you don't have to face anything. But, oh, yeah. Can someone please just, there's the movie How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Can someone do something like this about friendships? It will be very useful.
Yeah, for me as well. I mean, I'm now seeing all of this in a very like matter of fact, like, okay, let's look at all of the perspectives here. And like, I'm thinking of it now in a very pragmatic way. When in real life, I get very heartbroken about friendships as well. Yeah. And I'm far from rational when it happens to me. So, but it was really good for me to think about these things as well. So yeah, I mean, but honestly, yeah, what's the least cruel way to end the friendship? I don't fucking know. I don't know. It is cruel either way.
There's no cruel way. There's no not cruel way, because if someone is invested, it will always hurt. And that's just the problem. And it also might hurt the person who ends it. It's like in a romantic breakup, sometimes people have to end it. Like you said, you realize that person is holding you back from your growth and you might need to end it. It will hurt you still. You still have memories and all the great things you had, and you will still miss the messages from that person maybe, or you find that these jokes don't land with anyone but with that person, Like, it's always hard for both sides, I would say. Well, not always for both sides, but most of the time for both sides. Okay, well, this kind of leads me to my last agony aunt question, which would basically be how to heal from a friendship breakup. So, like with any breakup, after a while of being distanced from each other, you kind of start missing the person. Like when you break up with a romantic partner, a lot of times people end up missing their ex. And I think that's because when there's been some sort of pause or distance, you kind of start romanticizing relationships, past relationships. And then lots of times when people go back to them, we tend to end up in the same bad situation or get caught in like this repetition of, oh, this is why we actually separated. And I'm going back to that clinical therapist I mentioned before, Miriam Kiermaier. She says that after a friendship breakup, it's common to feel the same anger, sadness, loneliness, and anxiety as you do with like a romantic breakup. Especially there's like this fear of mutual friends picking sides, just like with when you get divorced or like break up with your partner. And she suggests that understanding all of these feelings and recognize that those are normal will help you start moving forward a bit. And after a friendship, what it all comes down to is like cutting yourself some slack, like recognize the language you use when you're talking about yourself instead of jumping to labels like calling yourself I'm such a bad friend. Like, again, speak to yourself as you would speak to a good friend of yours. And then my personal advice to this would be, and I think I would give exactly the same advice to someone who's going to a romantic breakup, is just feel all the feels. Like, the end of a friendship can really break your heart, but like process your anger, process the sadness, let it out. If you have to cry, just allow the mourning. And the mourning, this sadness can also just happen when a friendship changes, right? It doesn't just have to be if it ends, if you're just not that close anymore and you really miss those times. Eventually it does pass and you will gain back energy, and that can free up like space and capacity for new friendships or projects, or just energy you needed for something for yourself. And then I think one big part is also to take accountability for the role that you played in this. Like, reflect on it, learn from it. Even if you left a toxic relationship, maybe you realize there's like a pattern and you always end up in relationships where people kind of are a bit toxic. Maybe use this to check your boundaries, set new ones to avoid this from happening. And then lastly, but most importantly, I think, talk about it to your other friends, family, whoever, like you would talk about your romantic relationship that ended. Because feeling that shame and keeping it to yourself can be really, like that clinical therapist said, isolating, and just makes you feel even worse. I think the part of the processing is letting it out and talking about it. Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. I like that. Great advice. Yeah. Do I have anything to add here? Not really. I just think with friendships in general, and when they get to this awkward stage, I would just say, yeah, as kind of like how I would summarize all of this, I think try and however difficult it might be to, or however easy it might be to like label someone as like the villain in this, or like the person who did everything wrong and then the person who is left hurt. Like, try to, and I'm saying this to myself more than anything, but like try and assume that people don't mean it in a bad way, or they are not actively trying to be hurtful. But it is very awkward. Like we've said a million times, we do lack the socially accepted language or ways to do things. Also, yes, everyone makes mistakes as well. It can be that like in my case, that one friendship definitely hurt you and was very much like I was left feeling very hurt. And of course I did see that person who like ghosted me in that extreme way as like the villain in that story. But then when I look at myself, I have also made mistakes with other friendships, and there's also things that I'm not proud of. And yeah, sometimes maybe too much time has passed now that I feel like I also, I don't know, like reaching out to them and apologizing would maybe also be weird or whatever. And then the last thing I think is accept that you will never have all the answers. And again, that's mostly to myself. But yeah, just like with a romantic relationship, you will never have, we say that so many times, like, oh, but I just wish I had closure and everything. But even if you have those answers, then you will still have more questions. I just feel like you will never have what you're looking for exactly. So just try and then just realize that, I don't know, in whatever way, it just wasn't a good
meant to be
match anymore. Yeah, it wasn't to be. And that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like we've been through another therapy session.
Yeah, oh yes, definitely.
But no, I think these episodes really helped me. Just like, again, I might be saying one thing in one episode and the other thing in this episode, but this is not because I'm talking rubbish. This is because this podcast is also literally for us to have conversations and figure our thoughts out and how we feel about things and to learn and to grow, just like when you talk to a friend, So
Yeah.
Should we go to our recommendation section? Well, in this case, part 2, actually relating to the episode.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't have much because we talked about in our second episode, we talked about this moving abroad during friendships. And in the last episode, we talked about how to handle friendships and why do they end as we get older. So there's only so much out there, but I would wish for more. So my suggestion is not mind-blowing, but it's the movie Bride Wars. It's like is it a noughties movie? No, I think it's like 2010, something like that. With Anne Hathaway and Kate Hudson, they're best friends, but then when you look at the movie, it's all like the storyline reveals how the friendship was always a bit like imbalanced, and then they both get married and the whole competitiveness comes out, who will have the better marriage basically, and they start manipulating themselves and yada yada. It's a nice movie to watch. It's entertaining. But yeah, it's one of the few that touches up on friendships and how they can change.
Yeah, I like that one. Maybe I need to watch it again.
Yeah.
I think, well, I also only have one recommendation because, when it comes to books and everything, I did recommend a couple last time, but there's not really many books that focus on friendship breakups. Again, I would love to read some more, but there is one that I read recently. It's very thin. It's like 140 pages. Well, maybe that's not very thin. I don't know. It's relatively thin. And it is called How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart by Florentina Liao. And this is a woman who it's nonfiction, but it could actually easily be fiction. It reads as fiction, I think. And this woman moves to Kyoto to live with a friend. And then they get the same job together and everything. And then they kind of have, like a couple of years there together. And then that friendship also ends quite unexpectedly. Well, she gets ghosted as well. And so she kind of has these, she starts thinking about the city because she has moved out of Kyoto, but also kind of how that city now, everything in that city, there's like a memory of that friendship as well, and just kind of how she navigates that as well. And I thought it was brilliant because I don't know, I haven't really read that much about I haven't really read that much about friendship breakups and how they can impact your life a lot. And so I really like this.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
So before we wrap up, we want to say a big thank you to all of you who made it to the end of the episode. We hope that you enjoyed it and maybe that you had something that you could relate to. And remember, the journey does not end here. We will be back next week.
Yes, and the best part is we want to hear from you. We know that each one of you has their own unique experiences and probably some good friendship stories to share. So please don't be shy. Connect with us on Instagram at We Are Millennial Musings. DM us and share your own musings and funny moments with us. Or the even not so glorious times in this scenario, because it would be also relating to friendship breakups. And you can also follow us on TikTok. Our name is Millennial Musings. That's just it. Yeah. And
Yes. So until next week, and keep those stories coming.
Bye.
Bye.